Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers. Today we're talking post-free agency, post-Russell Wilson trade, roster evaluations. Should be a fun show, talking about all sorts of players, movements, players available, work the draft stuff in, all that fun stuff. Welcome in, Keith. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. This is going to be a fun show. I mean, we can get to look at, with all the moves that have been made, where does the roster stand right now? And I think that as we have this, phase 2 of free agency, which is the slower portion where, you find good deals and that kind of stuff rolling through. And then going into the draft, like, we need to know where the roster stands, because there's been the guys that have left, guys that have been retained, guys that have joined the roster. And so just having a chance to go through and look where everything is, I think is it's like the right time to do that. So
it is kind of the right time to do it, because I think most of the moves have been done. I think the Seahawks filled out pretty much what they're going to do, maybe with the exception of tackle, Keith. That seems to be like still a very glaring hole. Everything else seems to be okay as we head into the draft. I mean, you could put quarterback in that bucket, but I think the Seahawks feel like Drew Lock might be an opportunity waiting for them to kind of have a guy that they could mold a little bit. I know how you feel about it, and I feel the same. I don't think they feel that way. I think they
too
much is riding on jobs and seasons to put it in the hands of a guy that's got 5 good quality starts in his career.
Yeah. And I think that he's got 5 good quality starts and 17 bad ones. But they've got a situation where, what else what are they going to say when he was asked? It was a loaded question. Ask, can you win with Drew Lock? Is he going to say no? And basically throw the player that just came over in a trade under the bus, the guy that might be the starting line.
Right. And they didn't.
He can't say no.
And they still haven't yet made a move on like a Baker Mayfield thing, which would kind of tip their hand a little bit as far as at least getting through a season with a guy like Baker Mayfield and making it to next year's draft. They could do the same thing with Drew Lock and just basically kind of have the roster built around him and see if he sinks or swims. If he swims, that's great. If he sinks, we're in a position to take advantage next year. We can talk about that, more often or more as we move forward with this show. I created a spreadsheet that basically lists all the position groups and the depth chart. And I figured we'd just share that and kind of go through it and talk about what they've done this season. So before I get to the spreadsheet, let's talk about what they've done so far. So we had the Russell Wilson trade that kind of set in motion everything. And we did not bring back Bobby Wagner. He's testing the market. I don't believe that they're probably even interested in bringing him back on a 1-year deal, but we'll see. Who knows?
Last I heard it's sounding like he might end up with the Rams.
Which whatever.
Which would be it would be weird, because this is a team that's losing a lot of its talent because of free agency and guys at the end of their career, and then to spend what it'll take to bring in Bobby Wagner for another aging player who's expensive. It doesn't seem like a good fit. I think he's a better fit, in Kansas City, where they're desperate for defensive players and defensive leadership. Like, that would be a much better fit than the Rams. But you know what? Whatever. I just want Bobby Wagner to find a spot. I wish Bobby the best. I don't care I'm not going to be like, oh, why did you go to a rival? I don't care. Go be awesome. Go be Bobby Wagner. You're a first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the best that's ever.
He's earned the right helmet to call his own shots. So, and he's his own agent, so he's literally calling his own shots. Dwayne Brown is still out there. In fact, might be the best option for Seattle to kind of find continuity this year on its before it heads to the draft at the tackle position. You can say the same thing with on the other side with Brandon Shell. Gerald Everett, Ethan Posick, Geno Smith, Rasheem Green is the interesting name on that list so far out there that we did not bring back. And he's still out there looking for a job as well. We re-signed Quandre Diggs, Rashad Penny. I think the last time that we recorded, Rashad Penny has yet to be re-signed. So that's a good move for them. Al Woods, Sidney Jones, Ryan Neal, Kyle Fuller, Brian Monet, Phil Haynes, Will Disley. Outside the organization, we brought in, obviously in the trade, Drew Lock, Shelby Harris, Noah Fant, and then Quentin Jefferson came back, Austin Blythe, the center. We signed on a one-year deal, Artie Burns, one-year deal, and then Joel Ayagbuniwi, something like that, is a linebacker previously with the Chicago Bears. Has got a ton of special team snaps, barely any regular season snaps at the position, and
no,
so it looks like that's
he's
just
a
filler
special
stuff.
team guy.
Yeah,
yep. And Anawu to be probably the Sam linebacker. Although, so you look at the other things that they also released Kerry Hyder and Carlos Dunlap at defensive end.
I forgot to mention those guys. Yeah.
So with those two guys and Rasheem Green gone, they brought in Shelby Harris. And then, having a guy like Anawu come in, it looks like he looks like a guy who'd be a perfect fit for the strong side linebacker in a 3-4. The Seahawks appear to be making that jump because Kerry Hyder and Rasheem Green, Carlos Dunlap, they're not true 3-4 ends. They're 4-3 ends. And they're also not guys that are going to go out to outside linebacker. Which is, that's why we call them edge players when we're looking at draft things, because a lot of 4-3 defensive ends are 3-4 outside linebackers, but 5-tech defensive ends in a 4-3 don't move back well. I mean, do you really want to see Rasheem Green in coverage?
We saw that last year. Well, we saw it.
We did, and it was terrible.
Right.
And so having they appear to be who are they retaining on the defensive line? They're either guys that they believe can move and to a 3-4 outside linebacker, or guys that can play up front in a 3-4. They're, the big guys, the Al Woods and Brian Monet and those type of guys that can eat space in a 3-4. They seem to be going all in on this conversion. Now, I still expect them to be somewhat multi in terms of their fronts and move people around and come out in different sets throughout the season, but it does look like they're altering their personnel to be much more 3-4-ish on defense.
Right. So I brought up the spreadsheet that I kind of put together. It might be hard to see on your phone. I think if you turn your phone landscape, you might be able to see it a little better. And then everyone that's watching on a desktop or laptop, it should be fine. I could eliminate us and I could just go full screen like that. Might be better just for a little bit.
That's typically better because no one wants to look at me and you. It's just the way it is. And for those of you that are listening to the audio only podcast, we're going to be talking about players. We're not going to be pointing at things and expecting you to see it. So it'll still work.
So let's start at let's just start at the top left corner. Quarterback Drew Lock and Jacob Eason is there. Pete has talked endlessly about bringing back Geno Smith, although he's still an open free agent. That's why he's not on this list. So obviously thin as we move towards team needs. And I'll have that graphic up after we have a discussion about the whole list here. I think, you can have quarterback on that list. Now, whether or not we act on it this year, given the way that we strategize moving towards this season, what is your opinion about what Seattle does? Do you think they're going to stay? Or do you think it's likely now that we either move on Baker Mayfield or we draft a guy?
Actually, with all the stuff, all the movement, there's a lot of quarterback movement that's happened, including Matt Ryan to Indy and all of that. Where are the places that Baker Mayfield could go that have starting jobs available?
Seattle, the end.
Or Atlanta, if Atlanta's wanting a 1-year bridge. Like those are the two options. So there's not going to be a market for him. No one's going to give up a lot for him. So they're going to sit back and wait, because there's no way that Cleveland goes into training camp with their former number one overall pick starter and the guy they just gave $230 million guaranteed to and traded away all those picks for.
Yeah, and I think they went out and got a second. They got a backup too.
They did.
Remember Brissett?
Brissett. Yeah, Brissett. And so Baker Mayfield will not be on that roster. So they can wait this out. There's no reason to go throw a high pick at them.
And $18 million. So yeah, Cleveland's going to have to solve that.
Yep. So
they may even just release him.
Yeah. So that's what I'm waiting. You just wait it out because no one's trading for him. So you wait it out, wait for them to release him, which they probably will here in a couple of weeks. And then you don't have to give anything up, and you can go sign him to a 1-year prove it deal. Maybe you give him $7 million or whatever to come in and be your starter. And you don't have to take a quarterback from this not good quarterback draft at all. And you can have your 1-year bridge, and it gives Mayfield a chance to go out and play 1 year where he's pretty much got the starting job locked up, and build his market so that next year he can, try and go get a better deal, a bigger deal.
All right. Running back. Why don't you tell me what your thoughts are on this list here? Chris Carson, Rashad Penny, Travis Homer, DJ Dallas. Got a couple of young guys, and Josh Johnson on the practice squad last year, and Darwin Thompson they picked up on a futures deal.
This is essentially the same running back room they had last year, minus Alex Collins, and Alex Collins was the steadiest thing they had last year. So I think the running back room is a mess. Chris Carson is a guy that everybody likes. He's a fan favorite, but he hasn't played much. Was not available all last year. Has this neck injury that required surgery. It's very similar to the neck injury that ended the careers of Cliff Averill and Cam Chancellor. And so, do we count on him coming back? I just don't know. Penny looked fantastic down the stretch. The last 5 games, they brought him back. But he's also, before that, he had 3.5 years where he barely played because he was always hurt. So are either of those guys you count on next year? I don't think they are. DJ Dallas looked good at times last year, but has never been super impressive as a running back, but he's been better as a kick returner. Travis Homer's good out of the backfield catching passes, but can't run between the tackles worth much. It's just it's not a good group. I would say likely is that, Carson, because of his contract, ends up not coming back. And they go with a draft pick. So it's going to be Penny and a draft pick.
Yeah. You pretty much said everything that needed to be said there. I mean, that's exactly the way it is. How about,
why don't you do the same thing for a wide receiver?
Okay. Well, wide receiver is pretty well set at the top with Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Dwayne Eskridge, who didn't play a lot last year because he was hurt early, never really got into a rhythm, kind of came on a little bit. I'm anxious to see actually what he does this year with the evolution of the offense and him being available from day one, if possible. And then Freddie Swain rounds out that top 4. Then you've got Aaron Fuller's been hanging around a little bit now. Cody Thompson's been here forever on the practice squad. Kane Johnson came in last year as a kind of an up-and-coming guy that surprisingly didn't go drafted. Seattle picked him off in the undrafted free agent market. Matt Cole and Penny Hart's still hanging around as well from the last couple of years. So at the top, it seems like that the top 4 are pretty well set this year. I don't see Seattle reaching or drafting high for a wide receiver. They may draft for depth later on. They've got 8 picks now, likely to come out of the draft with a couple more in addition to that. So maybe later they could get some value with a guy that can also come in and play special teams as well and add to the competition there for those guys trying to make it to the 5th and 6th spots possibly.
What do you think about the idea of, since the Seahawks are kind of in this rebuild, if they get offered, like let's say, a second round pick for Tyler Lockett, do they take it?
That's interesting. The market out there is crazy. We just saw, the Kansas City wide receiver Hill being traded to the Miami Dolphins for picks. That was kind of an epic situation, epic move. And it really it tipped it, I think, more in terms of DK Metcalf possibly being available out there on the market and teams desiring the upside of Metcalf and his age versus Lockett, his contract, and his age. And so Lockett, as a team, what can you get value for? And do you want to, are those two your building blocks? Would you rather build around DK Metcalf? Yeah, you probably would. Do you want to pay DK Metcalf $25 to $27 million a year, which looks like what the market would probably bear next year? I don't know if the Seahawks want to do that. And DK Metcalf has struggled at times with his immaturity and play on the field and just inconsistencies. He's got tremendous upside. Everybody knows that. Everybody likes DK Metcalf, but do you want to pay DK Metcalf $27 million a year? You've got to have centerpieces to build around on your offense, and he seems to be a guy that you could definitely build around long term. Tyler Lockett has probably got at least 2 or 3 more years, but he's going to be, towards the downside of his career here soon as well. We just don't know exactly when that's going to happen. He's a guy that's caught, over 1,000 yards here 3-4 years in a row, and is just as steady as you can be. But is he going to be the same steady receiver with a new and unproven quarterback? I'm not sure. Do you take advantage of the market now as you build out the roster? And we're going to go through, you'll see there's many holes that the Seahawks could improve upon if they had young, cheap talent. And those 2 wide receivers would give you some more picks. But as we know, just having picks in the draft doesn't mean anything. Those picks need to turn into something. And it's always a 50-50 proposition.
At best. Yeah. I just look at that trade and I go, okay, the Chiefs looked at it, that massive deal that Devontae Adams got from Vegas, and the Chiefs were looking at having to give a deal like that to a guy who is a great player, just absolutely game-changing speed, but he's a smaller guy, a guy who that speed is what makes him a great player, and he's that's not going to last, right? At some point, guys that are all speed they lose that step, and then they aren't there. So they were just looking at the idea of paying this massive deal, and they weren't sure they wanted to do that. And instead, they got 5 picks for a wide receiver, which is just crazy. That's a crazy good return. And I just look at that and I go, for them, this is a team that's been to 4 straight AFC title games, 2 Super Bowls in there.
Yes.
And you can see that the window is closing. Their defense took a major step back last year. They've had to spend a lot of free agent money on the offensive line to try and fix that. But the defense still needs a lot of work, and they don't have the money to do it. So now they turn around and they free up cap space and they get 5 picks for this guy. But they do take a step back because he's such a game-changing talent. But 5 draft picks?
Yeah, well, now you have the opportunity to go and improve your roster on draft picks. You're going to take a shot. I mean, you might miss, but you're going to take a shot, and you get right with the salary cap, and it actually strengthens your team going forward as a whole when you come to complete roster building, and you're not just focusing on one position. Those contracts, Keith, are just crazy, and it really does, and they're slightly ahead of the cap growing by the media contracts that are coming in the next 2 years. And so it makes it really difficult this year, but I think as time goes on, those contracts end up being the norm, which is astounding to me, but it is what it is. And so if you extend DK Metcalf this year at say $22 million, that might be a bargain in 2 years. And so I'd rather do that and build around DK Metcalf and have that piece on the Seahawks for the next 4 or 5 years as we try to contend again. If you trade DK Metcalf, that's a key piece that you wouldn't have as you're trying to ramp up. So, and you mentioned Tyler Lockett. I'm just not sure. Tyler Lockett's such a glue piece to this offense and to the, as an outlet for any quarterback coming up. I think he would be a great fit. And so I would hate to lose Tyler Lockett. But again, you're talking about value here. And I keep going back to DK Metcalf because I honestly believe that the phones are ringing at DMAC.
I hope you're listening.
For DK Metcalf.
I don't want to see Metcalf play in another uniform, but this is a team that's roster is kind of crap at the moment. And having that Ferrari at wide receiver doesn't mean anything if you can't put gas in it because you don't have a quarterback. And that's where they're at. They don't have a quarterback. So
and we have an opportunity to take advantage of a market that's just kind of crazy right now.
Yeah. So if there's someone calling and offering,
Green Bay,
a package, it's not going to be what the Chiefs got, but if they could get something that's similar,
they could get a 1 and a 2 out of this deal if they played it right.
Yeah. And if they can do that, like Green Bay get a 1 this year and a 1 and a 5 this year and a 2 next year. As much as I'd hate to see Metcalf leave, I would really consider it because this is not a good roster and they need to rebuild and they need a lot of opportunities to get new players in here if they're going to do so. And
yeah, it's crazy. I didn't know everyone would be upset at this conversation, and I get that. And like he said, we're not advocating for the move, but if the move happens, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of the world. Just like you took the words right out of my mouth, and you get compensation for it at the top of the market for DK Metcalf right now. He's not going to, he may end up being worth more 3 years from now because he just completely goes off the rails and at a high all pro level. And that's just the chance you have to take when you ship somebody out. But the return there, I think for a rebuilding team where you've got roster holes all over the place is really something that you do have to look at.
Well, and the other half of that is if you are going to go in through a year with Drew Lock as your quarterback, the value that DK Metcalf has may go down as Metcalf has an off year because they don't have anyone who can get him the ball. And so now you're 1 year closer to that decision of do you pay him a ton of money or let him go? And his value went down both because that's one less year of team control that you'd be trading for if you were trading for him. And 1 year closer to having to give him that mega deal. So ultimately, this might be the best opportunity for the Seahawks if they are going to make that move. I don't want them to.
Yeah.
If I'm being completely honest, I just don't want them to. I want them to sign Metcalf.
Would you do Lockett?
Lockett's
he's harder to trade, I think.
I think he's harder to trade because he got a bigger deal last year. And so his contract's a little there. Plus he's older, he's smaller, he isn't that prototypical one. Even though he has all of the production for the last 4 or 5 years, he's just been so good consistently every year. I think he's a top 15, top 20 wide receiver in the
top
NFL.
15. Yeah, top 15, easy.
And
maybe top 10.
I mean, and I don't know if NFL GMs and NFL circles see him in that same way that we do, because we see him play. We know the things he does. He's not just a guy with stats. He's a guy that does all these little awesome things that make him good. And
so whereas DK Metcalf might be worth 3 picks, a couple early picks and a later pick, what do you think Lockett would fetch?
See, that's what I'm not sure how talent and production. He looks like a guy that would be worth a first round pick, but then you look at him on the field and he's a little guy and he's fast and shifty, but he's not that He's not
a traditional
Metcalf.
number one.
Yeah,
wide receiver.
He doesn't look like Julio Jones or whatever. I go, hey, they're probably not going to get a 1 for him. So if they can get like a 2 and a 4, that's probably what they're going to get from him. Maybe a 2 and a 3 if they're lucky.
And I wouldn't. I don't know that I would take that return. I think Lockett would be more valuable to a new quarterback in an offense that needs some continuity. Mm-hmm. I think DK Metcalf would certainly raise the interest of the Seahawks front office, and I think based on the way that this market has played out so far, with all the epic trades and team acquisitions, this would just be one more that you would add to the 2022 offseason of players changing teams and teams giving compensation. I mean, literally, there's like 6 or 7 changes now in first round draft picks as far as changing teams and so forth, just because it's kind of crazy. Okay. Tight end, Keith, we inherited Noah Fant in that Russell Wilson trade, probably the marquee player that we got in return. Will Disley came back. Colby Parkinson's still there with some upside. We just don't know yet. Talk to me a little bit about the tight end group. Having Noah Fant and Disley kind of doesn't force us to really have to do much.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you've got your 1 and your 2 with Fant and Disley. You've got the upside play with the 6'7" Colby Parkinson, who the team really likes. He's had some injuries, and he's also just had a hard time getting on the field. He's got kind of buried on the depth chart, is what's happened with talented guys above him, and that's kind of the case now. I still think there's a lot to be had from him. So really, they're 3 deep at that position, and you got Tyler Mabry, who team likes. He's been around for a while. Do they do anything there? Maybe like an undrafted free agent or a 6th round pick, but they're not going to add anything significant.
Yeah, because if they do add somebody, it's likely they may not make the squad. I mean, Colby Parkinson, I think they still would like to find out what they've got there. It's clearly a red zone target. He didn't get a lot of action last year. Not sure why, but with Noah Fant and Disley there's an opportunity for him to have a role. And I'd just like to see that play out a little bit. All right, let's get to the spot that's the most problematic, I think, right now, as time is, other than quarterback, is the offensive tackle position. Both left side, Stone Forsythe, right side, Jake Curran are there. We didn't see Stone Forsythe last year, 6th round pick in the 2021 draft. Still waiting for an opportunity. He certainly got it right now as the roster stands. I don't expect it to stay this way, though.
Yeah, and I'm very confused. They've gone out and they've spent money at other positions, but their most glaring weakness, which has been offensive tackle, has literally sat there all offseason as an obvious thing. I mean, and they
did try.
They did, but they didn't try hard enough because they haven't actually added anyone. And so what are they going to do? I mean, are they going to sit at 9 and take Trevor Penning? I wouldn't mind that, but that only solves half the problem. They still got, the other side. There's still no depth whatsoever.
No depth. Right.
And you're not going to be able to win with Forsythe and Curran as your starting tackles going into this year. Now they may both turn into better players, but they're not there now. You've got to have a guy. If you're going to give Curran the starting right tackle job,
I think you need at least one guy.
You have to have a proven guy on the left side, someone that your quarterback can trust. And if you're going to go with Stone Forsythe on the left side, then you've got to have a proven veteran on the right side, so the quarterback knows he can roll away from pressure if he needs to.
Let me share the list with you of available left tackles in free agency currently. Dwayne Brown. That seems like the obvious choice for a guy that can come back on a 1-year deal. I still think that this is possible. Eric Fisher, previously with the Colts, Riley Reif, Chris Hubbard, previously with the Browns, Kendall Lamb, Nate Soldier. I mean, it goes downhill quickly from there. At the right tackle position, you've got hold on just a sec. Brian Beluga is the guy, previously with the Chargers. And then Darrell Williams, Billy Turner, Marcus Cannon, Jesse Davis, guys that who knows, right? So, and Brandon Shell is still sitting out there. And so, is it possible? I wanted to ask you this when I saw both of our tackles from last year are still sitting there. Is it possible Seattle runs back, grabs those guys for 1-year deals, and just goes forward like that in 2022?
Possible, yes. Likely, no. They're trying to move on. They're trying to get younger. They're trying to get cheaper. They're trying to.
Oh, there's no doubt about that, Keith.
And I don't think you do that by bringing in the 37-year-old guy that's whose play has been declining, or Brandon Shell, who's never been great. He's had a few good games here and there, a good stretch, during the first 6 games of his time in Seattle, but he's not been good otherwise in his Seattle tenure. How do you get better by bringing either of those guys back? You get significantly worse by not replacing them and going with nothing. But you don't get better by bringing those guys back. So we're not talking about getting better. We're talking about getting through a season, though, for our quarterback and for our team, just to basically ride to the next stop. Yeah, just kick the can down the road again. Dwayne Brown would be the guy that I think is more likely of those two. Shell's a replacement level player. You listed out a bunch of guys, and are any of them significantly worse than Shell? No. So the only reason you'd bring Shell in is familiarity. Okay, I'd rather take the chance with someone else and see if a younger guy's got some upside that maybe I'm not seeing. I wouldn't bring him back.
Yeah, I agree with you. Dwayne Brown seems like the logical choice there to come back on a 1-year deal at left tackle. And then I would let Jake Curran compete with a possible draft pick as we move forward. Let's shift to guard. Do you want to do the offense on this show and split this thing in two?
Let's do that.
So Damian Lewis, Gabe Jackson, obviously the starters, nothing to worry about there. Phil Haynes came back on a deal, and then Pierre-Olivier Lestage is sitting there. Dakota Shepley is also listed as a guard on Seahawks.com, but he can also play center. And then Kyle Fuller came back at center, Austin Blythe at center. So that's our interior offensive lineman. Seems to me like we're pretty well set heading into the draft, but it may be that they draft a guy to compete at center, possibly, a swing guard type of player as well.
Blythe is a guy that a year ago was considered kind of a big name. He's a great player, but he didn't play last year. I think he played 7 snaps all year because of injury.
Creed Humphrey also came and played, took his lunchbox.
Yeah, that's part of it. But so Blythe is coming in. He's got the talent, got the experience, good player, but is he healthy enough? And Shepley and Fuller are your backups, and that's kind of scary because we saw Kyle Fuller be terrible the beginning of last year.
Yeah, I don't even understand how he came back, but he did.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure how he is still in the league at this point, unless he's just roster fodder because they needed someone to snap a ball during training camp.
That's possible too, because it's an unguaranteed deal.
Yeah.
So, a guy like Cole Strange, like in the draft, which would be a center prospect, but also could play guard, seems like a perfect fit, a guy that you could probably pick up with our 3rd round or 4th round pick, one of those 4th rounders. Yep. Interesting. So do you have any concerns with the way things shape up on the interior offensive line other than
I just think the depth isn't there. I mean, the 2 starters at guard are fine, and Austin Blythe is good, but I just don't see much behind them. Phil Haynes has played in a few games in his entire 4 years in Seattle, and he's looked.
Jamarco Jones left.
Yep, he signed a way too big of a deal to go be a backup. That made very little sense. I don't see the depth, and I think they're going to address the depth in the draft.
Yeah, the offensive line as a whole right now is just horrific to me.
Yeah, because right now you're looking at an offensive line from left to right of Forsythe, Lewis, Blythe, Jackson, and Curran.
That's not going to intimidate anybody.
Jackson is the one, a good player. Damian Lewis might be. We saw him. He looked great as a rookie, but did not It didn't carry over last year because of all of the injuries and stuff that he dealt with.
Maybe you could move Damian Lewis inside to center and put Phil Haynes at left guard.
Possible.
Well, I mean, we got Austin Blythe. I mean, if Austin Blythe still plays the way that he played for the Rams, I just don't see that being a problem. I think he comes right in and kind of takes over, especially with Shane Waldron and Dickinson there. That he's their guy. They brought him in for a reason. They trust him. I think it's his spot to lose right now before the draft. If we happen to draft the center in the first 2 rounds with one of those first 3 picks, he's in jeopardy. But other than that, I think he's
you're
good to
talking
go.
about bringing guys back. Before this team brings back Shell, I would rather see them bring back Ethan Posick to be a backup center, backup guard, because he can play all 3 interior line spots. He is good for a backup. He's not good enough to be your every down starter. I just don't think you'd go forward with him in that spot if you're expecting to get better. But he can come in and play a few games. He has experience at both guard and center. I think it's just it's a good fit. The market hasn't been there for him. He's still out there waiting for a phone call. If he's waiting for too much longer, a 1-year deal to come in, be the backup center, backup guard, they could do far worse.
All right. Quickly, what are your offensive needs and what grade would you currently give the existing offensive roster?
My offensive needs are everything but tight end, and I would give this roster a D.
Oh, it's so painful. Last year we were going into the season with so much optimism, Keith. I predicted 13 wins. It was just one of those crazy things, right? And now we have not a completely different roster, save Dwayne Brown, really. But here we are with despair in our hearts that Drew Lock is our quarterback and our running back room is completely disheveled. And the only thing really good, well, I mean, the wide receiver room and the tight end room look pretty good. Yeah. Other than that, it's really bleak.
Yeah, because when you got a guy like Russell Wilson, he covers up a lot of stuff. He can make a bad offensive line look less bad. They're going to miss him so much, especially if Drew Lock's the guy. The running backs we were kind of, okay, like there's a lot of talent in that running back room when we went in last year. It's the same group of guys coming back, but after a year of seeing, Chris Carson not play, and then we're looking back and go, wait, he hasn't been healthy for a while. Now, he hasn't been the Chris Carson that we think of when we think of the words Chris Carson for a couple of years. Is he still worth that contract? Is he still worthy of a roster spot after being, fairly
is Penny worth $5.75 million for 6 or 7 games of production, and the rest was just scattered over 3.5 years.
Yep.
Where it was like
he has to be the guy that he was for those last 6 games all year. He needs to play. He needs to play in 12 or 13 games minimum and be that guy that we saw. If
he's that guy and Drew Lock turns out to be a somewhat decent placeholder, and the tight ends and wide receivers have good years, and the offensive line comes together, this team could actually surpass expectations. I get it.
This
we're going to happen. Yeah, but
that has to happen.
For a fact, we're going to have that issue for at least 2 years.
Yeah, but it's not.
We're going to have the if situation going on for a while until this team proves it.
It's not if this happens or that happens. It's if this happens and that happens and that happens and that other thing happens. You're talking now. You went through a 6-game parlay. If you want to talk in betting terms, how likely is it that you hit on all 6 of those games? The answer is very low, and you end up losing all your money. Yeah. Now, if you do hit on all of them, you're going to make a ton of money, but you're not going to hit on all of them.
I basically I said 2 ands: Rashad Penny and Drew Lock. If Rashad Penny and Drew Lock have league average years for Drew Lock and an above average year, just like we saw from Penny in the last 5 or 6 games, not maybe slightly step down from that, this team could actually outperform expectations. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but expectations are 3 wins.
I think expectations are bigger than that, actually. I think expectations
are 3 wins.
I think by the time we get in September and we record a show about predictions, expectations are going to end up being 7 to 8 wins with this roster.
I hope not. One,
I know.
I don't think this roster
I hear you,
is
though.
good. I don't think this roster is good. I think this roster is bad.
It's not good yet, but we still have 8 or 10 picks out to add to the roster.
Yeah, but so does every team.
And but 3 of them are going to be pretty high. Maybe 4, 5 in the top 100 probably.
True.
That's a pretty significant infusion of young, hungry, fast talent to your team in key position groups.
But you're going into the draft as a bad team, and everybody is drafting players.
Yeah, 15 teams out of the NFL go into the draft as a bad team, though. I mean, we got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, I don't see, you can't make enough additions to this roster to make it a good roster.
And we haven't even talked about the defense yet, which is the next show.
Which is the next show and a big problem. I think expectations, we need to walk into this year with low expectations. And I think walking into the year with low expectations is good news, because you don't want this team to win 7 games. If they go
it does seem like perpetual, like middling ground if we win 7 wins, because there's no way out of 7 to 9 wins.
Yeah.
But if we traded like a DK Metcalf, we would have the ammunition to move up almost anywhere in the draft to get the quarterback that we need. So
yeah, but
it could be worse. I'm just saying it could be worse. This team is going to be competitive, though, Keith. You know that the coach is not going to allow them to lose games on purpose or anything like remotely.
No, they're not going to lose a game on purpose, but they don't have the talent. They don't have the talent to play with teams.
This is a talent deficit team. We just went through the roster.
It is what it is. It is. They don't have the talent, and they don't have a Russell Wilson to go in and bail them out and make them look better than they are. This is a team. If they go out and win 3 games, I think that is what the roster looks like to me. They look like a 3-win team.
And this is a coach that's writing everything on the defense winning games for him this year. And we're going to go through the defensive roster in this next show, and we're going to show that maybe that's a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah. And they're going to be in a spot to basically look at this. They're going to say, we're going to go for 9-10 wins and try and make the playoffs. Everyone's going to look at the roster and say, 7 wins, maybe. And I'm going to look at this roster and I'm going to say, honestly, if I'm being truly honest with the talent and compare it to the other teams around the NFC, I see a 3 or 4 win team. I see a team that's going to pick first or second in the draft, and they're going to be in perfect position to draft the next franchise quarterback, and to do so without having to trade DK Metcalf to make it happen. That, to me, is not bad. That is the ideal path. And you'll say that I'm being like pessimistic when I say this roster is 3 wins. That's not necessarily
pessimistic. That's a strategy. That's not being pessimistic.
Yeah, I don't see it. I see that as being the fastest rebound, the fastest way towards becoming a contender again.
Can you argue that Pete Carroll can still be Pete Carroll and being the Mr. Optimistic, Mr. Competitive, Mr. Everything, right, going forward, and still lose? Can those things still come together?
Oh yeah. They can. I mean, he can go. He'll be talking about, we're making progress and we're getting better, and we're getting things figured out, and we have all these young guys, and they got to figure out how to play together, and blah blah blah. But we're gonna get there, and he'll be peating it up all year, and then the team will be bad, and then they'll come around and be like, you know what, we weren't good, but we didn't have. We're have an opportunity to go draft our franchise quarterback. We have all this cap room and all these young players, and we're going to be great next year. And I mean, that's Pete Carroll.
Well, and that's really the way it is.
Yeah.
That's the way it is. All right, let's get out of here, Keith. Hang with me though. So you can find Keith at Myers NFL. I'm at NW Seahawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook. Find us on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube. And please subscribe. That would be great. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWSeahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.